Welcome back to Global Dialogues. 93 low and middle income countries, including India, could face nearly 23 million additional deaths by 2030 as global aid declines. And that's roughly equivalent to the population of Florida. This, according to a report in the Lancet Global Health. The Barcelona Institute for Global Health, with the support from the Rockefeller Foundation, analyzed data from 2002 to 2021 and outlined two defunding scenarios. A mild reduction of about 10.6% annually could lead to 9.4 million preventable deaths. Sharper cuts of 15% or more, as seen between 2024 and 2025, could result in over 22.6 million additional deaths, including 5.4 million children under the age of 5. Notably, 2024 marked the first time in nearly 3 decades that major donors, including the US, UK and France, all reduced aid, with further cuts expected in 2026. Humanitarian assistance is now taking center stage at the 2026 Munich Security Conference as the security fallout of these cuts comes into focus. Meanwhile, President Trump has revoked a scientific finding that climate change poses a public health risk, a move that removes emission limits on vehicles, power plants and other major pollution sources. The administration says the rollback will lower regulatory costs and support businesses, claiming savings of up to $1 trillion. Well, joining us now from Munich to discuss the global impact of aid cuts and the humanitarian risks ahead is Dr. Shah, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation and the former U.S. aid administrator. Raj, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. You know, through the week, the headlines have been screaming disruption on account of AI and, the global IT sell-off that has captured imagination. But little attention is being paid to the numbers that I just read out on the cuts as far as global aid go and the impact that that's likely to have on global health outcomes. How concerned are you today?
Well, we're extremely concerned, and thank you, Shereen, for reporting on this. Look, about a year ago, President Trump shut down U.S. aid, and America pulled back 67% of its resources for humanitarian aid and assistance and global cooperation. The United Kingdom has reduced by almost 40%, France and Germany by almost 20%. And we're seeing those as just the first step in even further reductions coming in the future. So we now know, after a year, what the impact of these cuts will be. As you point out, somewhere between 9.5 and 22.5 million people will likely lose their lives if these cuts persist. 5.5 million of those kids are under the age of 5. And here's why that matters. At the end of the day, if we were today to have a 2008-style food security crisis or a 2014-style Ebola crisis, those would become global points of instability because we are taking down the ability to solve those problems in the places where they occur. And so far beyond the loss of life, which is tragic and a moral catastrophe, we're making the world less safe and less interconnected by embracing a highly transactional view of great power competition. This Munich Security Conference has the opportunity to lift up an alternative, a view of great power competition that includes some enlightened values, where we say, look, there are some common global threats, pandemics, health risks, climate risks, and if we work, and AI, frankly, as well. And if we work together to address those risks, we can all be safer and more secure.
But are you seeing any takers, Raj? That's the big question at this point in time. It's, the global attention and the focus is on how to deal with tariffs, how to deal with the volatile economic climate, how to deal with AI. Is this even getting any attention at the security conference in Munich?
Well, our goal is to elevate this issue and to make sure people understand that since World War II, a great part of the reason for why we've had relative peace and prosperity and stability across this planet has been a view towards global cooperation that's been informed by values and not just might is right. And so that's what we're working on, is to get that visibility. I will say, if you look just at the tariffs, the economic coercion is in the same direction. You know, prior to President Trump, America's generalized tariff rate was about 2.6%. Now, on a generalized basis, it's about 13%. For the 44 poorest countries in the world, most of which are in Africa, it is 27%. And so it's the tariff fight is actually doubling down on the humanitarian and development pullback to make life harder and more challenging for the most vulnerable countries on the planet.
Well, speaking about future vulnerabilities, Raj, President Trump has revoked the scientific finding that climate change poses a public health risk, a move that removes emission limits on vehicles, power plants and other major pollution sources. What kind of a setback do you see on account of this?
Well, this is a tremendous setback, but one that I think almost everybody saw coming. The reality is in the last 3 years, we've seen the rate of global warming increase by nearly 40% over the prior decades. And the truth is, just by ignoring the issue isn't going to make it go away. A much smarter strategy is to play to win the future. There's no reason why every economy shouldn't be racing, including the United States, shouldn't be racing to win the fight to invent the batteries and stationary storage solutions that can transform economies, to build renewable energy solutions that can power data centers and enable a clean, sustainable, and bright new future. And simply trying to win the past is not going to be an effective strategy for any single nation. And when it happens in a country as big and powerful and relevant to the global economy as the United States of America, it's a setback for the whole world.
Well, in this scenario, Raj, what are we talking about? Is there a silver lining anywhere in sight? 2026, are the cuts expected to get worse? And the role of the private sector, do you see the private sector retreating further even?
No, I actually think the private sector is the silver lining. So in India, for example, at the Rockefeller Foundation, almost all of our projects are large-scale innovation and science-based public-private partnerships that bring government, entrepreneurs, local, in that case, rupee-based capital into projects that are, for example, trying to reach hundreds of millions of people in rural India, farm communities mostly, with improved, more consistent and lower cost electrification so they can create jobs and opportunity. We see the same project taking hold in Nigeria, in Brazil, in many countries that are effectively middle-income countries and have greater state capacity. The silver lining is a new model of development, of inclusive growth, and of shared prosperity that brings the private sector and science and technology together to serve those who are at the bottom of these economic ladders. The challenge, of course, is in countries that are fragile states. In those places, right now, we're setting ourselves up for an absolute catastrophe should we face a food crisis or a pandemic that looks anything like the ones we've experienced over the last 2 decades.
So in the interim, the big vacuum that's been created because of government funding and aid being cut, the private sector can do its part. But what happens in the interim till we actually see, some governments take a call on returning back to the table?
Well, I think the answer to that question is also the answer to how we get governments back to the table. We at the Rockefeller Foundation have launched a partnership with Mr. Beast, for example, a young YouTube executive who's well known around the world, a YouTube influencer, who reaches 800 million young people. And when we do school feeding programs together in Ghana and Kenya and elsewhere around the world, those young people react strongly. They say, look, we want kindness to go viral. We want to live in a world where there's some degree of compassion and empathy. These are people who've grown up on their phones and who have ready access to the lived experiences of people all around the planet, and frankly have a bit more compassion, empathy, and understanding than some of our most cynical older leaders. So my answer to that question is we need to embrace a form of collective accountability where we're not just relying on governments, but we're tapping into the sentiments of the best elements of human nature across young people across this planet and getting people to do what they want to do naturally. No child wants to look at a starving kid far away, going hungry, skipping out from school, working in forced child labor because they don't have the opportunities that kid has. And we understand that instinctively. And so our effort is to try to unlock a movement based on that sentiment.
Well, we do need plenty more of that kind of movement, but you are going to be here in India in the next few days, Raj. Take us through what the plan is now for India and a status check on the projects that you have currently underway here.
Well, we're very proud of the work we do in India. A lot of it is with the government, it's with the private sector. The signature effort we have is called the Global Energy Alliance Initiative, which is reaching tens of millions of people with access to power and electricity. We're using technology of a small AI company that has helped digitize the entire electricity grid for Rajasthan. And we can literally see the outputs of that very tech-heavy investment where they use drones to map every single element of that grid. And now they can shift from coal to renewable sources where it's cheaper and more efficient to do so. Now they can have farmers build out solar infrastructure on their farms and sell into the grid and get a feed-in tariff. And the reality is, if we can lower the price of electricity and energy for rural communities in India, we can improve agriculture, we can improve farm incomes, we can improve women-led businesses and the jobs that they create and the incomes they have, and empower those women and transform India's lived experience for the, for the poorer rural communities and farm communities. And we're really excited about that project. It's a big part of why I'm visiting India, including going to Lucknow to see some of the new expansions of that effort. And that's just a great example of what's possible when we bring the best of modern technology together with policymaking and government partnership and a little bit of philanthropy. We can reach hundreds of millions of people and make their lives better.
Well, Raj, look forward to seeing you here in India. And thanks very much for joining us from the Munich Security Conference. We do hope that there are takers to the pitch that you're trying to make. But at this point in time, it does look like it is a fairly sobering reality. But appreciate you joining us here on the Global Dialogue. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Global Dialogue. From all of us here on the team, for now, goodbye. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. We've got plenty more lined up.